Hello and welcome. Welcome to Pauline's Quilters World. I'm Pauline and I want to talk to you a little bit about our Bias-Sasher Ruler and why I love this ruler, why I designed it and why I use it. And then I want to talk to you about our 1/8 and 1/4 inch Sasher tools. You know, you may be a person that has a complete set of our tools, a set of 10, or you could purchase these individually. But when we make bias, like we've got on this gorgeous ebony and ivy quilt down here, we've used the 1/4 inch and the 1/8 inch to make the bias. I find that a lot of people have a lot of trouble with bias, particularly going around these tight curves. We can sometimes get lots of puckering happening inside that curve. Now if you cut your bias strips out and you're 1 or 2 threads off the true bias, that's where the problems start to occur. So using the Bias-Sasher Ruler, it's going to enable us to cut the fabric on the true bias. Now we're going to move to the cutting mat and I'm going to show you how to use the tool. Now when we're going to cut this, we're going to align one of the diagonal lines running this way on this straight edge of the fabric and one of the diagonal lines running this way on the top edge of the fabric. So just make sure you've got a nice straight edge on both sides. Line the ruler up so it's laying exactly parallel there and exactly parallel here. Now if it's not, you know you won't be on the true bias. And this is where I find this rule is very important because most other rulers only have the 145-degree angle, so you can't always be checking the other edge. So now what we're going to do is cut this edge off, and I love to use the little 18mm mini cutter. I find that I get a much better cut and I don't get the distortion as we get as the big blade rolls along, because when we cut with the big blade, the bigger the rotation, the more the fabric moves. With the small blade, we don't get that. So we just cut straight across to get our first cut. We'll remove that corner, and you can cut bias off this edge if you want, but we're just going to continue to cut here. So now I'm going to line one of these lines straight on that top edge of my fabric. And you'll notice the ruler doesn't fit right to the edge to give me the diagonal reference, so I'm just going to start cutting. As I get down here, I'll stop cutting, I'll slide the ruler so that the diagonal line now is laying parallel on this edge, and I know I'm still on the true bias. And we can just continue to cut that bias as we go. But if you don't want to keep moving the ruler, try folding your fabric. It makes it so much easier. So I'm going to take this straight edge up to this straight edge. So I'm going to be folding along this bias edge. So we go over. Now the ruler would fit there perfect and we could continue to cut, but I always like to fold again. Just fold over, just keep everything running in line down along here. And then we're going to put one of our straight edge diagonal lines on this straight edge. Now we've got a very small cut to take, and it is so much faster and you'll get so much more bias cut a lot more accurately if you keep doing that. And you'll just keep moving down till you get the whole lot cut. And then we're now going to use the little sashes and we're going to make some bias. To make our bias, we've cut this strip 1/2 inch wide. We're going to use the 1/4 inch tool. So if you're using a different size to what I'm showing you now, whatever the measurement appears on the top, you would cut your strip double that width. Then just turn the edges in on both sides till it meets. That's a little bit tricky, don't burn your fingers. This is why I love using the little mini iron, because it gives me a little bit more control than the big iron, but your big iron's fine. Now we're going to turn the fabric over so the folded edge is facing down onto our ironing surface. We're going to come up through from the bottom, through that little hole, and back down through the hole. Pull it through. Then we put this onto our ironing surface and we're going to pin into the ironing board, and I find the double fork pin, this little pin, is the best one to use. because I want equal tension on both sides of this bias. And I find if I do it with 2 single pins or 1 pin, one side of the bias strip will stretch more than the other. It's just a natural thing that happens. So pin in, pin it right into the ironing surface, so you're burying the pin so the iron won't get caught on it. Now the curve in the sasher is designed to fit the side of any iron. As I said, I like to use the mini iron, but if you're using your big iron at home, that is fine. And all we do is push the tool with the iron. Just go slow because we want to get lots of heat into it. Iron about 12 inches and then run your iron back across your strip so that you know sure that you've got plenty of heat into that. So that is then going to keep that folded beautifully for you. Then reposition the pin and keep ironing. So about every 12 inches reposition that pin to keep yourself more controlled. And it is so easy to make beautiful bias. So there we go. Now we're ready to apply it to our fabric, and I'm going to show you how I do that. Now we're ready to put our bias in place, and we've quilted this piece of fabric like we have with the ebony and ivy quilt. We quilted first, then made the bias, and then we've attached the bias over the top. And what I use now is to put the bias in place is the glue pen. I just find using a good quality glue that you know that's going to wash out of your fabric, just run the glue wherever you want the bias to go. Grab your iron and we just iron this in place. Now if you happen to hit that glue with your iron, it doesn't stick to the bottom of your iron, which is really nice. And you just keep going around, we'll turn it around so you can see, and just keep ironing it into place. And you'll notice that it sits around those tight curves beautifully without any puckering. And that's because we've put the fabric, when we cut it with that Sasher ruler, so we know everything's on the true bias and it runs around those curves nicely. We've ran out of bias here. We want to join it. I don't like joining strips of bias at my sewing machine. I just don't like joining little strips like this at this machine because it just is too fiddly. So what I do is I make individual pieces like we have. Then I get myself a nice straight edge here and we'll cut this little tip off. Oops, cut that off. Then we go and we put some glue on the back side of this strip that we've made. Then we turn that onto a 45-degree angle, just like so. Then pop a bit more glue in place here and we align the edges of the piece we've just folded with the edges of this piece, just like we have here. Put it in place, align it up neatly, and then keep gluing. Then when we stitch this on, I usually stitch it on with a straight stitch really close to the edge, and I use the open toe foot of our sewing machine. I use the monopoly clear thread and I do a straight row of stitching right on the edge. And then when we finish stitching, we come back and we nip this little peak off here, and then nobody will know that you haven't sewn that together when you joined it. It's just a little tip that you might enjoy using. The next step we're going to take is I'm going to show you how to use the 1/8 of an inch sasher to make really fine bias. I first of all put this piece through the 1/4 inch. Now I've done that because I want this to be more of a rolled piece of bias. I don't want it to be laying flat like it is here now. So put it through the 1/4 inch, which means I cut this strip of fabric 1/2 inch wide, folded it in, put it through the 1/4 inch tool. Now I'm going to turn this in half, fold it in half. I hope you can see this detail. Just press the first little bit. And this is always the hardest part of this, is actually getting it in through the holes. So come up from the bottom, then you'll need something sharp to help you come down. So I just use the tailor's awl to do that. That then folds your fabric in half. Once again, pin with the double fork pin into the ironing board to get that nice tension onto your fabric. And then we're just going to fold the fabric ahead of us, hold it nice and firm, and you will push with the iron. And you will get beautiful, beautiful 1/8 of an inch bias made. And I've not ever been able to find another tool that will do that for me. And you can do some beautiful, beautiful things with the bias. And we're going to be teaching you in our online classes all the different things you can make using these tools. And it's so worth it because you can decorate anything with bias strips this size. So we want you to have happy sewing. We would just experiment with your bias and see what you can do. And I'm going to show you some wonderful projects that we've made using the Bias-Sasher Tools, and you can do some really, really gorgeous things. So we'll just do a little show and tell for you. Some of the things I'm going to show you, I'm teasing you with because they're not yet patterns, but they will be patterns very, very soon, and you'll be able to even come online and make the project with us when we're ready to go. Here we've got a gorgeous little quilt we've made, and it's quilt as you go. We quilted the fabric first, so there's one piece quilted here. We quilted that. We used the Sasher tools to make the bias. We've put a 1/4 inch bias here, and we've put 1/8 of an inch here. Then we've used the tools again, and we've cut the fabric on the straight grain here, and we've woven the basket. So you can see the nice basket there that we've woven. Quilted first, did the applique, and I don't know whether you can see it, but we've joined it together here using one of our 4-inch Sasher tools to put this together quilt as you go. And we've used the Sasher tool to actually do the binding for the edge of the quilt. So this is all quilt as you go. So that's one little thing. This one here is a little table runner. Once again, we've quilted first, glued our appliques in place, then we've put nice bias around the edge, and we've joined it together quilt as you go. Another little table runner, same thing, quilt first, glue your appliques in place, put the bias around it, and then join it together with a different style of sashing. So there's many, many, many gorgeous things you can do with bias. So experiment, just make a small block like this. Using different size tools and cutting it on the true bias, you'll get around those corners. So hope you've enjoyed learning how to use the 1/8 and the 1/4 inch tools and the Sasher ruler. But I'd like you to subscribe to our email newsletters by going onto our website www.pqw.com.au and join us and have fun.